So I've been watching Finding Your Roots on PBS and exploring my own ancestry through family records, Ancestry.com, and DNA testing through 23andMe. Now, if you're not familiar with Finding Your Roots, Henry Louis Gates Jr., with a team of experts, explores the genealogy of celebrities through both DNA and documentary evidence, revealing untold family stories along the way. And frequently, in the ancestry of these celebrities, they find someone whose lives mirror or prefigure their own. I have told you in the past that I have found this phenomenon in my own lineage. I am descended from a man, Reuben Germain, who worked as a civil engineer in the early 19th century in New Jersey before finding a calling to the Episcopal priesthood. Eventually, in 1855, he traveled from New Jersey on the Erie Canal to a part of the frontier city of Buffalo that had just newly been incorporated from being the separate village of Black Rock. When he got to Black Rock, the Reverend Germain took on the rectorship of a congregation that was about ready to dissolve, Grace Episcopal, which met in a shared space with other mainline Protestant congregations in a building that still stands at the base of Breckenridge. Eventually, this same Grace Episcopal would join with St. John's and form the congregation of St. John's Grace, the parish where I was received into the Episcopal Church. And the Reverend Reuben Germain, together with his son Duane, also my direct ancestor, and their wives, would be buried in Forest Lawn Cemetery. Being a civil engineer and an Episcopal priest myself, I have found this ancestor's life particularly meaningful to my own, though I never knew he existed until long after I made choices that mirrored his. Now, in addition to this common thread of finding ancestors whose lives are closely linked with one's own, the show Finding Your Roots also tends to tell the common American story of endurance. If you live somewhere else in the world, your family history may involve staying in one place for generations, centuries, or even millennia. But in the United States, all of us are descended from at least one of three groups of people. There are those with indigenous blood, and while their families are deeply connected to this land, they have endured forced evictions and relocations, cultural genocide, and forced marriages, but have nonetheless endured as peoples, not as one monolithic Native American people, but as nations with their own languages, traditions, and cultures. There are those who are of African and Caribbean American descent, whose ancestors include those who endured the torture, repeated family separations, forced labor, and brutal conditions of slavery, so that they may exist today. And then there are those of us who are descended from voluntary immigrants, who had to face violence, starvation, or some other dire circumstances that were hopeless enough that the air making this journey to the United States, leaving all they knew, including their homes, their families, and their livelihoods behind, made sense. In summary, we are all descended from survivors, people who came through brutal odds, who watched as family and friends died along the way, and somehow managed to allow us to exist. Now, I bring this all up today to say that though we may feel comfortable in the lives that we have today, we have it in us to change, to risk all that we have and all that we are on the unknown, in the hope that there is a better world out there. Our ancestors have shown us the way. We can follow it if we choose. In the gospel, Jesus chose men who were landless and far from wealthy, but who were scraping by, who could have chosen to stay where they were and continue to fish day in and day out and feed their families, but never live remarkable lives. But instead, they chose to follow after Jesus, to lay down their nets and go off into the unknown, knowing that it was a gamble. They did not hesitate. They just laid down their nets and followed immediately. That is what we are called to do, to set aside the comfortable and follow Jesus where he is leading us, but we cannot see where the path ends. And I know that that can be a hard challenge, and especially when one has lived a long life following Jesus one way. To be asked to set aside the comfortable when one has earned it seems like too great an ask. but it is in our very DNA. We are survivors. We are made to adapt. We are here because we can change and we can choose once again to follow Jesus into the unknown and the uncomfortable to find a new path. Amen.